Hey everyone, this is Mario again, coming at you with another movie review. Before I start off today's review, just to let you guys know... Hey guys, this is Mario again, coming at you with another movie review. Today I'm reviewing a movie that I just got done watching, and I've been wanting to see this movie for a while. Heard a bunch of good things about it. I'm a fan of the original. Yes, this is a remake. You guys can tell that from the title up there. And for years I've been wanting to see it because I saw the sequel as a kid, which the sequel will be the next film I review after I give it another watch. And this is a film that was released by 20th Century Fox. So once again, this shows that they can make very good movies when they get good directors and give them good screenplays. And this, of course, is one of the few remakes that I could say I like more than the original. That's a bold statement coming from me because I can't think of any other remakes that I could say that for except maybe The Blob. And this is probably my favorite remake, so Blob was probably number 2, this is number 1. And that is, of course, Cronenberg's The Fly. As they say right there, The Fly is a true Cronenberg masterpiece. I have to agree with that. This is a masterpiece of a film, and I think some people consider it to be Cronenberg's masterpiece, so if they consider it his magnus opus, it's good. Now, the 3 main stars in this movie are Jeff Goldblum, who plays Seth Brundle, who is a brilliant but eccentric scientist. Geena Davis plays Veronica, who is a journalist. And John Getz plays her boss. Excuse me if I mispronounced his name. Stathis Borans. That's just a weird name if you think about it. A very weird and unique name. I bet his character got picked on as a kid. That might explain how he is. Now, by eccentric, what I mean by that is it's Seth. You can tell he doesn't really get out a lot and meet people. Doesn't do a lot of his life. He basically buries himself in his work. And also, he wears the same outfit every day. It's just weird. I guess so he doesn't have to make decisions in his life, as he says. Veronica, you can tell that she might be a little bit of a bitch, but in a good way. Not like, you know, the high-strung way, but she's an interesting character. And, of course, Stathis, he is just a total prick. To steal a line from Alexander Knox from Batman, what a dick. This guy is so smug. Every time he said something, I just wanted to reach to the screen and smack him upside the head. To steal a line from George Lopez, give up a putazo like no other. He's going to bounce off the wall and I'm going to hit him so hard. And since his character had a previous relationship with Veronica and also is her boss, or one of her bosses at least, you can tell that he's going to be nosing in her business a lot. Now, the idea for this remake originated with a screenwriter named Charles Edward Pogge, if I remember right. Now, I haven't watched the special features on this, but I really want to give them a watch. And I want to listen to the commentary, because this is a good special edition DVD. If you don't have it, I suggest you do. Now, from what I understand, I've read a synopsis of Pogge's script. It basically is what you would get when you take the original film, the film we have in the remake, put him in a blender, and that's basically his script. A little bit too close to the original, probably. It would have been different and definitely a remake, but probably not enough to warrant it to say, oh, that's better than the original, at least in my opinion. Now, here's what the original idea for the remake was. That, like in the original, our main characters were going to be a married couple. The husband was going to be a scientist, and he'd be working on the teleportation. Now, the thing that was like in the remake, is that he has an employer, but unlike the film we have, his employer is not really seen. The employer is Philip DeWitt, and then he has a friend named Harry Chandler, which there's something about them that I'll mention when I get to Cronenberg's changes. Well, he eventually shows the product to one of them, and then his friend snitches to his boss steals it, after the scientist has a fatal mistake and transforms him into the Fly. And as the movie goes on, he loses his voice, and by the end he can't talk, which is kind of like in the original, but in the original he can't talk at all because he already has the head of a fly. And of course it's basically a downbeat ending, but probably not earned as much as this one, I guess, just from reading the synopsis. And also, there were some things that made it into the final script, like the monkey cat sequence, which is not in the final film, I should say. And then, of course, the vomit, which I will get to later. Cronenberg came in and he liked the screenplay, I think, a little bit at least the idea, but one of his conditions was that he got to rewrite it. And that was probably for the best, like I mentioned a little bit earlier. That idea, the original idea, was interesting, but not far enough removed from the original. So he came in, changed it, and some of the ideas that he liked that were unique to that screenplay he changed, but he rewrote all the dialogue, which was probably for the better, changed all the characters around, and he combined the characters of DeWitt and Chandler, and we got Stathis, which is probably for the better. It's something similar that they did with Freddy vs. Jason, where they shortened the screenplay and combined two characters, which sometimes that's a good idea, especially if you want to increase the pace of the movie, because this movie is, let me find the running time. I think it's like 90-something minutes. 95 minutes. And it has a quick pace. It starts quick and the pace keeps going. It really gets you interested in the film, which I can see now why a couple times when I talk with Efrey about the Wolfman remake, why he says that the film should have been more like this, because I am one of the fans of the Wolfman remake, even though I know it has flaws. And after watching this movie, I could agree with him a little bit. They should have taken notes from this film when they did the Wolfman remake. You know, made it a quicker pace, because that's one of the problems I have with the Wolfman remake, is that it just takes a little bit too long to get started, especially when you compare it to the original in that respect. With this, it probably should have taken that note, have a quicker pace, and also go a little bit more into the struggling with the new nature of yourself a little bit. But that would have been interesting. I know if I ever did a werewolf movie, I would take notes from this film. Now the plot of the movie is that Seth Brundle, like I said, he's a scientist. He meets Veronica at a Meet the Press event held by Bartok Science Industries, which is the company he works for, which they basically are in the background in this film, but they become important in the next film, especially the owner of Bartok Industries. I guess you could say he's a little bit like the old man in RoboCop 2. How you don't see a reason to hate him in the first one, and in the second one you want to beat the crap out of him, basically. But anyway, that's for the next one. Because Brundle's work is not really expensive, nobody has really nosed into it, but it's a very good invention. The telepods, which I like the look of the telepods more in the remake. Then again, they have that futuristic vibe to them, and they actually look more like they'd be telepods than in the original. The problem, though, is that he can only teleport inanimate objects. He can't teleport living things yet, which I have to say, that's a nice little change to make, because in the original, he can teleport stuff. It's just at first they come out, the inanimate objects come out, like if they have writing on them, they come out backwards, and living things at first don't come back at all. So that was interesting. Eventually, Seth and Veronica become lovers, and it's because of her that he gets an idea, and he figures out how to teleport living things, because the first time he tried to, it basically came back inside out, because the teleporter was having trouble deciding how to put them back together, so it was its interpretation. Just like when they tried it with a steak before he did that, it was giving them, as Seth put it, its interpretation of a steak. So not real. Well, Seth basically gets drunk one evening. I'm not going to spoil why, but I'll just say it involves Stathis and Veronica. And as he tells the baboon, like the general said, I wouldn't ask my men to do anything I wouldn't do myself, so he goes to the teleporter, and a fly gets in there with him, just like in the original. But unlike the original, where he transforms immediately, he starts changing slowly, which I actually think that works a little bit better, how he slowly starts to transform because of how their DNA is fused. And it's because of that some critics actually saw this as a metaphor for the AIDS epidemic of the 80s, which I can see why they'd see that, but if I see it as an epidemic for a disease, I see it more for cancer, because cancer eats away at you. I know, because as you guys know, my grandfather recently lost his battle with cancer, but from how I saw him going bad, so I really see more of a connection with the fly having more of a connection with cancer than it would with AIDS. But again, I don't know anyone who's ever had AIDS, but cancer eats away at you, basically. And that's basically what this fly mutation thing is doing to him. At first he feels fine. He's like, yeah, I feel energetic, I feel the best I've ever had. But then as the film goes on, he gets worse and worse and worse. And not only physically, but mentally, which I thought that was nice, because that's something they mentioned in the original. That's one of the reasons that in the original the scientist wants to kill himself. In this one, you could just really see his sanity going, which That's one of the reasons why I am disappointed that Jeff Goldblum did not get an Oscar nomination, at least. At least a nomination. I don't think he got any award nominations, because out of the roles I've seen him in, which the only ones I have to compare it to are his Jurassic Park roles, which are pretty good. And of course, that small role he had in Man of the Year. But this is my favorite role of his, and it's a shame that he didn't get an award nomination. And of course, like the original, this kind of brings up the, you know, that whole thing of, are there things that men should tamper with? Do we go too far sometimes? Which, that is, even, it's been done so much, but I still do like that vibe when they can do something new with it, and this one does do something new with it. And it's probably one of the saddest love stories. It's a tragedy, I guess you could say. It's a modern tragedy. And it does have a downbeat ending, but the film kind of earns its downbeat ending. And I know there were 4 alternate endings they wanted to put after that. If they had done with one of them, it would have been Veronica alone with the dream, where you can't tell if she's pregnant or not. That would have been interesting to see. Which I've just mentioned it, so I gotta mention. At one point, Veronica does find out she's pregnant, which I know that's a minor spoiler, but I'd already mentioned it anyway, so I gotta touch on it. I'm not gonna ignore the elephant in the room. And there's a plot thing with it that I don't want to spoil, but it does add into the climax, so I'll let you guys mope on it if you haven't seen it. Like I said, a modern tragedy. And when it gets to the climax, the downbeat ending, like I said, the film earns it, and it really makes you feel for these characters because of what they've been through, and you know that how the film ends, it has to end that way. There's no other way, just like in the original, because the original has a happy ending, but that's one change I like. I don't know what else to say about this movie. It is a classic, like I mentioned before. It is a masterpiece. I'm actually glad that it got a very good DVD, and I know that there's some deleted scenes on here, which I've seen one of them, which that would have been interesting to see in the film, but not necessary. One thing, though, I'm happy to report is this film did win 1 Oscar. The only one it was nominated, like I've said before, earlier. That's kind of shame that no acting nominations, but it won for Best Makeup, which I have to say, if this film had not even been nominated for Best Makeup, it would have been on like Donkey Kong. You know, send Seth Brundle after those guys to kill him, because the makeup in this movie, magnificent, because I'm looking at it, right, 1, 2, 3, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's 7 different versions of Seth's fly makeup, and each of them is as good as the last. Because it starts off slow, and then slowly it eats away, it eats away, it eats away, until we get the final fusion of fly and man, which it's you could tell it's a fly and human mix, and it looks very good. And the puppetry on that thing, beautiful. Nowadays it'd be all CGI, so. Speaking of which, from what I hear, they want to do another remake of this, which Cronenberg apparently is behind, which I look at him and go, Cronenberg, really? You're going to pull a George Lucas now? Don't. Look at the fans of the Star Wars movies. They hate it every time Lucas makes changes that are unnecessary. So, don't remake the movie. And like I mentioned before, there was a sequel to this movie, which I'm going to be reviewing that one next. It's over there. I'm going to give it a watch once I'm done with this review. And also, it had an opera done a couple years ago, which I've heard some good things about the opera, but would I watch it? Maybe watch a couple select scenes, see how they were done on stage, but the whole opera probably not, because I'm not really an opera kind of guy. I mean, I like musicals, but for me, a musical should be acting, music, acting, music. I'm just not in for straight music. It's like, just imagine Star Wars, the opera. It's like, Anakin, you kill Padme. No, no. How can this be? It's just the concept alone boggles your mind. But I could just imagine some things from this movie. I just thought something funny. The famous line, "Help me," and turn it into a song. Help me, won't you help me? Which, I guess I should touch on that. They do take that famous line from the original, "Help me," and they put it in the movie, and I thought they did it in a very creative way. Different from the original, but still very emotional. And of course, this movie also has one of the most famous taglines in movie history, which actually originates as dialogue in the film, which I'm glad they used it, and that is, "Be afraid." be very afraid. Which, I love that tagline. It's up there with just when you thought it was safe to go back in the water and other famous taglines. And critics actually really did love this movie. It was very critically acclaimed. And like I mentioned earlier, when Jeff Goldblum did not get an Oscar nomination, some people were disappointed. And like Siskel said, even though, you know, I don't really agree with Siskel and Ebert, I kind of agree with him on this, that the reason that he probably got snubbed out of a nomination was that most of the older members of the Academy usually ignore horror films. Even nowadays they do. Nowadays, horror films mostly just get makeup effects. Like, take The Wolfman, for example. That's the only Oscar nomination it got, which it did win, was for Best Makeup, which I have to say, like the film or hate it, that werewolf makeup deserved to win. Which I guess you could say kind of another connection between them. They both won Best Makeup. Would have got more nominations if they had taken more notes from this film, though. But I can really see that. And it's a shame that horror films don't get more recognition at the Academy Awards. I mean, like I said, I think the only one that really got a lot of recognition was The Exorcist, and I can see why it won the ones it won. But I really would like to see more horror films, and even some comedies, get nominations. Especially the films, like, the people are like, oh, this film doesn't, like, the critics trash, that are, like, tongue-in-cheek ones. But the ones that know that they are what they are, not the ones that are trying to be serious but are funny or so bad it's good, stuff like that. I'm talking about the ones that know what they are. Now, my rating for The Fly, I give it a 5 out of 5 because I can't think of anything wrong with the movie. The pace is good. The effects are good. The music by Howard Shore, magnificent. And like in the original, it really draws you in more to the emotion and plight of the characters. The acting performances by all three of our main characters is beautiful. And for Jeff Goldblum, I feel he got snubbed out of an Oscar. I have to say it again. Cronenberg, I also feel, got snubbed out of a directing Oscar, which is a shame. I don't even think he ever got nominated. Because I'm going to see what other movies he directed, just out of curiosity. I know he directed that movie, Scanners, and always the fucking phone. Private Color. I'm just going to ignore it. And of course he directed Videodrome, and he directed one of my favorite Stephen King movies, The Dead Zone. And then of course he directed A History of Violence, which I really want to check that one out. But I feel, like I said, he should have got a directing nomination for this.